Presenting Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
There we go. Come on, pop right in here, huh? You didn't wait around a bit today. Good morning, Chris. Good morning, everybody. Really in the soup today, old bean. Sorry, I woke up reading Woodhouse. So, you know the Johnnies I mean. All of you fine chaps and old tops. Good morning, Beth. Hey, Martin and Mary. Maybe a bit loud there. Hey, Karen.
Let's dance to a half-hour rhythm by Benny Goodman and his orchestra, the Raja Rhythm, playing for you from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. Dodging a Divorcee, the first number. Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
Oh, Divorcee. Okay. I got the title written out as Divorce. Good morning, Bridget and Mary Jo. Hey, Karen and Gladys, Octavio, Larry, Kathy. Hey, Susan. Hey, everybody. Morning, Luann. Hey, Mariana. Hey, Marita. Morning there, Amy. Hey, Mariana. Hey, Rob. Got Miles down here on the desk. Sure was glad to see Ronnie back. Hey, Denise. Hey, Marissa. Mariana. Hey, morning, everybody. Hey, Nancy. Hey, Rob. Who tracked paint all over the floor yesterday? Who could that have been? You know how these chaps are. Always curious about new things and never wiping their feet. Hey, Jackie. Oh. Here we go. Title card. Morning, Jackie. Hello, Heather. Hey, Todd and Emily. Morning, Mom. Cassidy, Christy, that whole crew, I suppose. Hey, Mom. Carol. What did I eat at the effing group? I had the chicken Mario, which is a chicken dish, with roasted squash, whipped potatoes, and broccolini. And a really good old-fashioned that came with cherry bark vanilla bitters. And immediately I'm making sure I can find a place that can supply me with cherry bark vanilla bitters. I don't know why adding bark into there makes it sound so much better, but it does. Hey, Paula. Morning, Todd, over on Twitch. Hey, Bob and Cindy. Edwina, good morning.
The divorcee successfully, and we might say rhythmically eluded. Benny Goodman presents Helen Ward singing The Day I Let You Get Away.
Oh, we got Priya playing behind me here. What did you find, Priya? What did you find? Oh, I see. It's a twist tie. Those are fun. Hey, Elaine. We had a delightful evening. We've got a couple other mysterious effing Chicago trips planned pretty soon. We'll keep you up to date. Plus, you'll be checking in with all of them on the Thursday nights when they're giving Chicago for Chicagoans talks. On those weeks, I will do my regular tour on Wednesday. Just trying to keep an eye on both of the cats here. Well, Charlotte used to watch cat videos on TV really intently. Once she tried to jump into the screen the first time, but she learned pretty quickly that doesn't work. We kind of had to stop letting her because she said she would get kind of freaked out because she was sure the TV cats were around here someplace, and she kept on like poking her nose around corners and edges, trying to find how to get into that room. Jen, that sounds like quite a trip. I'm going all over the northern Midwest in the next couple of weeks. There's a Wisconsin trip coming. There's a Minneapolis trip next week. Next week, there probably will not be a Sunday morning full-length tour. We've already done the Minneapolis airports. Last summer or so. Now, birds, I haven't tried showing them bird videos yet. They might like that. The cats are fighting on the couch over here. I'll move over so you can all enjoy the show, or they were. There goes Miles. And Priya just sitting here by herself. Hey, Priya? No? Okay, you got some chasing to do. I get it. Morning, Mike. Hey, Barbara. Judy, I don't know. We're going to be, the effing crew is going to be going to the House on the Rock in Wisconsin. Layla has been trying to get me to go to the House on the Rock for a long time. We'll probably do something from there, I'm sure. I don't know anything about it, really. You know, I've read an article or two at one point or another, but they keep telling me, no, you have to come. We'll do that. Next week is a road trip. And next week, we should still be able to do Find a Great Friday. The plane doesn't leave till afternoon. But I might do it an hour early or something. Give it a few minutes for everybody to get online. Hey, Dina. I remember reading about it first, like in some kid's almanac book. It kind of bugged me, the book, because there was almost nothing anywhere near me. Next weekend? What is next weekend? I don't think I'm doing anything next weekend. House on the Rock was about as close as anything in that book. Lunar New Year. You know, I've just had enough holidays at this point. How many New Years do I have to have? I do enjoy tacky things, Kathy. Hey, Ken and Juliet. Hey, Meg. No, I haven't really been to Talisa, but I really probably should. That'd be Frank Lloyd Wright's retreat. Hey, Aviva. Hey, good morning, Grandma Bell.
Goodman is playing for you from the Joseph Urban.
Hey, Megan. All right, Bob.
And his next tune, Lights Out.
Hey, Heather. Heather and Christine. Hey, everybody. Hey, Elaine. Welcome along, everybody. We're going to let Benny Goodman do one more tune for us here. Karen, yeah, that's the one. Hey, Betsy. Have a good brunch. Have a muddle for all of us. Gail, the House on the Rock is someplace in Wisconsin. I'm avoiding finding out too much more about it, I think. Good morning, Lynn. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Vanya. Hey, David. Hey, Kristen and Gail. Welcome along, everybody. We're letting Benny Goodman finish up one more song here, live from the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. Susan, don't you know Arthur Deco was one of those mustache-bearing murderers? And in an era when most people were shaving their mustaches off, it was most injudicious to most faces, they decided. Wait, there's a carousel with dolls? That doesn't sound... Hey, Sue. Good morning, everybody. Welcome along to Mysterious Chicago. We're letting Benny Goodman finish up this one more tune, then we will get started properly. Creepy dolls on a carousel. You guys are not selling this to me. Dolls scare me the most. Eleanor, absolutely. I love that view.
And again, Benny Goodman presents his Lady of Song, Helen Ward.
All right, that was Helen Ward, everybody, with Benny Goodman and his Lady of Song, coming to you live from the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago, the Joseph Urban Room. That means it is time for us to get started. Miles, why are you crying? It's because we haven't done the Art Deco tour in so long. I think it's because we haven't done the Art Deco tour in so long. So welcome along, everybody. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours. Been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now. Author of such books as Mysterious Chicago, the book, Just Kill Me, Smart Alex Guide to American History, Murder Maps USA, new from Thames and Hudson. Apparently the publishers think I didn't do enough to promote it. Feel like I did. And Graceland Cemetery, Chicago Stories, Symbols, and Secrets, new from University of Illinois Press. Today we are going to be talking about Art Deco, the architectural style that emerged simultaneously with this new code in Chicago zoning in 1923. A lot of cities around the time of the late 1910s, early 1920s were getting concerned that buildings were blocking out the sun. So a new ordinance was put in Chicago, saying that particularly tall buildings, especially as they got taller, they had to get a little bit narrower. So otherwise, they were afraid even the snow might not melt. And this wasn't on the books for very long. Certainly not in Chicago. You can only find so many that really conform to this. But it's a little more common in New York. Well, so it just became part of the style, and having them get narrower like that made them appear taller. Now, here's a little bit of an introduction for what we say when we mean Art Deco. This is the Beaux-Arts style, the yacht club in New York on 44th Street, in case you like yachts but still want to hang out in Midtown. You can see everything looks kind of like it's melting in here. I'll make this a bit bigger, perhaps, so we can see it a little bit more. How much bigger can I make this? But yeah, with Beaux-Arts, the style of the late 19th and early 20th century, you get lots and lots of ornate Corinthian columns, you get a lot of statues and faces, and in this case, you also get these window dressings that look like everything is melting. I absolutely love this place. New York is especially known for its Art Deco. Meanwhile, in Chicago around the 1910s, the late 1890s to the 1910s, as we were moving on from the Beaux-Arts style, the very fancy and ornate style of the 1800s, we had things like the Marquette Building, which was what we called the Chicago School of Architecture, and the Prairie School, like the Roby House by Frank Lloyd Wright, as seen here down in Hyde Park. And up in Manhattan, they made the Equitable Building by Ernest Graham of Graham, Anderson, Probst, and White, who did a lot of the buildings that we'll be talking about today here in Chicago. But this is one right across from Trinity Churchyard. This is specifically one they thought was going to block out the sun in 1916, so cities started having these ordinances that the buildings would have to get smaller as they got taller, narrower and narrower. You see this in things like... you see it a little more in New York than you do in Chicago with things like the Chrysler Building. If you take the New York tour guide exam, there's a question, what is the finest example of Art Deco in New York? And honestly, that's debatable, but they want you to say the Chrysler Building. That's the correct answer on the test. And tests are really only all about how well you take tests anyway. We all know that, right? Right. The background of the Empire State Building. But this is the style, this is what we think of when we think of Art Deco. I often describe it as like Superman-type buildings. Like the Daily Planet, this would be a prime example. Even the Art Deco font on there, that 1930s vibe. This is from the 1942 Superman cartoons that tend to look like Edward Hopper paintings. This was around the time the Daily Planet building first started appearing in Superman comics. It was the early 1940s, sometimes said to be based on the Paramount building near Times Square. This is now the home of the Hard Rock Cafe in New York, so I'm in there with school groups really quite often. They can handle a school group like nobody's business. But really, Art Deco, as much as anything else, there are certain things we associate with it architecturally, like clean lines, simple geometric art, a streamlined verticality that emphasizes the height of the buildings, even when the building's not all that big. But really, Art Deco is just a vibe. It's a style. It's an aesthetic. And it permeated everything in the 1920s and 30s. Like here's a 1930 issue of Chicago Magazine, showing some of these new buildings that are going up in Chicago. And it's just, even when the cover's not doing buildings, it tends to have this Art Deco style. Like you can see here, very tall people. That's a motif you run into a lot in Art Deco, is for one reason or another, in the artwork and in the buildings and in the statues, they tend to have lots of very, sometimes comically tall people. Then in the back of this one, you can see the Jewelers Building, you can see the Wrigley Building, another one that I don't quite recognize, I think it's 333 Michigan there. And you even see it inside of this magazine, the Chicagoan. There was this interesting ad for Crush Dry. This was a cocktail substitute. It was Orange Crush, only kind of yucky. So, from the sound of it, it probably tasted about like a San Pellegrino or something, but it was, this is the 1930s. Prohibition was going on. Everybody was trying to manufacture things like winemakers had to make a grape concentrate, though they would have a warning label telling exactly how some careless person might turn this into wine. Well, we can see some of it here. Here at the Board of Trade in Chicago. If I were asked what is the finest example of Art Deco in Chicago, I would say the Board of Trade building by Hullibert and Root from 1929 to 30. Sometimes you see different dates for a building because they design it one year, start it the next year, open it yet another year. So it's a little bit unclear sometimes what year we should say for a particular building. But this is by Hullibert and Root, replacing an old Beaux-Arts style Board of Trade that was designed by, named totally spacing on me, William Boyington. Sometimes names really do just drop out of my head even if I've said them 1,000 times. But here's the Board of Trade as it appeared on the cover of the Chicagoan back when it was brand new. There's a more daylight version of it. Right here at the end, anchoring LaSalle Street. And this shot I got, this is the one I used for advertisement for the Architecture of Mysterious Chicago walking tour, which I can't wait to do again. There's going to be, I found a lot of news stories for that one just fairly recently. And this is one of the cool things about Art Deco is it also coincided with the era when these kind of electric lights became more practical. Having these dramatic lighting schemes on the building was something that was very newly possible. And having these buildings get narrower provided like embankments, places they could set up the lights to shine up on top. And of course, this one is known for on the top is the statue of Ceres, the Roman goddess of grains and agriculture, sculpted by a guy named John Story. It is often noted that the statue had no face. And on some of the boat tours, they'll tell you they figured this was the tallest building in Chicago at the time, which it was, and they thought nobody would ever build another building this tall again, so they figured there was no point in having a face. And Story does say something kind of to that effect in this interview. He says, as high up as it was, most people wouldn't be able to see the face anyway. But really, it's just more of an Art Deco thing. He didn't imply that nobody was ever going to build one this tall again, but there could only ever be so many buildings around it that would offer a view from up high. But you can also see that same sort of style in one of the more famous statues of the era, the Oscar, designed in 1929, about the same year that this statue went up. And you see there's no face on there either. There's just very vague suggestions. It's all kind of streamlined in the Art Deco style. As we get up closer to it, up closer are these reliefs by a sculptor by the name of Alvin Meyer, who is going to come up again. He did quite a lot of things on buildings like this. And here what we see is a Native American and a guy who looks like that wizard on the back of Led Zeppelin 4. A grain merchant of some sort, and again depicted with the legs are only suggested, but they would go all the way down to the ground, presumably making them very tall. Once again, very tall people, like even in the Marshall Field and Company ads from the era. These lovely pictures of very long-legged ladies. You also see them. I can't remember where I got this picture of an elevator, but it was somewhere around here. Unless it was in Iowa. That might have been in Iowa. Still, Art Deco. We can also see the tall person motif when we go up to the top of Lakeshore Drive and end up at Loyola University. This is Loyola today, designed by Fisher McCarthy in 1930. Initially, this was Mundelein Women's College. They've got a couple of statues up here in the front named Uriel and Josephine, which once again, the legs are only suggested, but they would go all the way down off of these very tall people. We're going to move in a little bit here to check out a little bit closer in. These are angels. And you can see these geometric patterns in the grate over around the doors here. That is a very Art Deco style. The simple geometric art was all the rage at the time. That very Great Gatsby poster style. A couple of others. There was also down at the bottom of Lakeshore Drive, at least as it turns into the loop, was the Palmolive building, here illustrated on the cover of the Chicagoan from 1930 when it was brand new. Holabird and Root designed this one back in 1929. And you can see on the top these beams of light flashing off of the top of it. We'll cover that in a second when we see the actual building. Back here behind the Drake Hotel by Marshall and Fox. And coming down Lakeshore Drive, it just looks like it's the back of the Drake Hotel. It looks like it's all attached. I thought it was for a long time. Back in me youth. There's a shot of it during the day. You can see once again here, streamlined verticality. It gets narrower as it gets taller. And here's a shot of what it looked like when it was brand new. This is a photograph by George Henry High. He was one of the Graceland Cemetery residents that I wrote about in that book. And if you look on the top there, you see this massive glowing light on top of it. This was called the Lindbergh Beacon. Really shows you when this thing was built. This was a beacon on top of it that would spin around at the time. And here it is contrasted with Boyington's water tower, with that big light glowing on top of it. And they said that this light was supposed to be so strong that you could see it hundreds of miles away. There was a story about a pilot who took off from Toledo, got his plane up into the air, saw this weird light off in the distance, and thought, I'll just go until I find out what that light is, and it turned out to be the Palmolive building. There were stories about people like pilots in Wisconsin who were able to read by the light of it, even though they were like miles out over the lake. People tested this. A guy flew out like 30 miles. Yeah, I could still read a little bit by it. So it's still on top of the building. They've now got arrangements where they don't turn it all the way around when it turns on now. It only points out over to the lake, not, into people's windows. You can see here when it was built, just looking around, there weren't any other buildings of that height there, so the thing could go spinning around and it wouldn't go into anybody's windows. Now, in the 1950s and 60s, this building became for a while the Playboy Building. And there, once again, you can still see the beacon flashing there. It's flashing right into the city, not against the lake in that shot. But this became the Playboy Building back when Playboy itself was a very mid-century modern kind of publication. You know, people who said they were reading it for the articles were probably telling the truth. It was all jazz reviews, literary fiction, tips on how to buy a tape recorder for under $500, with like 2 pages of black and white PG-13 photos. We'll move on to another one from about the same year that also had a beacon for a while there. I'm way behind here. Let's just start with that video again. So here we are on the Chicago River. Another Holabird and Root joint from the same era, the LaSalle Wacker Building. Right there on the lake. Here's a night angle of it. Well, here, we'll zoom up to that. So when I've got any number of pictures, that armchair shape was very popular at the time. Because we're really looking at like 3 towers in one here, in a lot of ways. Sort of a precursor to Fosler Khan and his bundled tube construction later. Here's a shot of it at night that's heavily edited with Instagram filters. And how it appeared inside of the pages of the Chicagoan magazine. Once again, you can see this enormous beacon up on top of it. This one was called the Sun Flash Beacon. Now, this was made very differently than the Lindbergh beacon. That was just one massively powerful electric light. This was made primarily of mirrors. It was like this whole series of convex mirrors that would reflect the light that was out it and amplify it in brightness. And here in this shot, in the background of it, you can see the Palmolive building and the Lindbergh beacon up on top of that one. There's an article covering both of those. Man-made stars guide curious flyers. There's an actual picture of exactly what the Sunflash beacon looked up at there. The problem they had with that was bats and birds were flying right into it and flying to their deaths. They'd have to sweep up an awful lot of dead birds off of the roof. I don't know how long the Sunflash beacon was really in operation. It doesn't seem to have been very long. It was one of those things that sounded like a good idea on paper. Now, the history of the inside of the building here is interesting as well. Now, in 1932, the Capone gang, or the remnants of the Capone gang, were using one of the rooms in it as an office when the cops, led by Detective Sergeant John W. Norton, who had been with them since the H.H. Holmes investigation, busted in and shot Frank the Enforcer Nitti up pretty good. He was the guy who had kind of taken over for Capone. There he is. But was just not as good as staying away from the cops and staying out of trouble. Now, he wasn't shot to death here, but it's not like he lived to a ripe old age or anything. Very few of the gangsters actually did. It was not a job where you would get to a long life expectancy. Now, eventually in the 1950s, office space in the building was occupied by a very different sort of gangster, but still kind of a gangster. Ray Kroc of McDonald's. This was the guy who bought the McDonald's brand from the McDonald brothers, initially agreed to franchise it, then gradually screwed them over a little bit more and a little bit more. He had been a traveling salesman. He operated a business called King Castle Sales, something like that. They had an office here in the LaSalle Wacker building, but he was mostly out on the road selling multi-mixers, which were mixers that could make 8 milkshakes at once. Now, there wasn't, frankly, a lot of demand. Not a lot of places really needed to be making 8 milkshakes at once. But then he found out these kids out in California, the McDonald brothers, had ordered 7 or 8 of them. And he had to go out there for himself just to see what kind of business was operating on this. So eventually, he was in the LaSalle Wacker building when he called them and said, "I want to buy you out finally." And they called him back, offering him a number that would have been about $1 million each plus 1% of sales. He screwed them out of the 1% of sales. But after they quoted him that number, he said, he dropped the phone, then picked it back up and said, "Did you hear that? That's the sound of me jumping out of the LaSalle Wacker building." I don't think he really talked like that. There are people in Chicago, like when the Architecture Foundation, there's one person with the Architecture Foundation who I swear talks in a mid-Atlantic accent. It came up to me recently to talk about the Graceland books. I'm like, "I can't say we're in love with you, but we do love your book." It's like, "I love buildings. Really, I do." But Take a quick look at the merchandise mart right across the river from that by Graham Anderson, Probst, and White. This was Marshall Field's wholesale showroom. Not really as flashy as I normally think of as Art Deco. This almost seems to me like an Art Deco building with butterfly wings coming off of it. We've recently got this set up with Art on the Mart. Doing a night boat tour can get a little bit tricky because of this. Graham Anderson, Probst, and White, 1929. The time it was built, it was the largest building in terms of square footage anywhere. It's still the second largest reinforced concrete building after the Pentagon. Had its own zip code for years. It's about the same square footage as the Sears Tower. There's one of them. This is one of my favorite Art Deco gems in Chicago, but most people don't realize that it's here because it's hard to get a very good view of it. But if you look down beyond the train tracks here that kind of block the view, you can see this one rising up with a little circular thing on top of it, that Daily Planet look. And this is the Trustee System Services building. The best way to get a look at it is there's a parking garage across the street. Take the elevator up to the roof, and there you get a great view of an Art Deco building. This is really a hidden gem in Chicago. Trustee System Services building by Teelbar and Reed from 1930. We'll move in on this a little bit here. Well, if you read up on this place, there's a lot of stuff saying that it used to be a speakeasy. None of it is from the 1920s or anywhere close to the 1920s. There was a lunchroom in the place that they're probably thinking of. Whether they were also selling some booze under the table, I have little doubt. They probably were pretty much everywhere. But it's one of those things, speakeasies were not known for keeping good paperwork, so you can almost always say there was a speakeasy in your building if you think that'll help. Now, if you look here close, this is a small representation, but if you move in, these designs are the caduceus. They are often used as a medical symbol today, but officially they're a symbol of commerce. Officially, it's one snake without the wings would be medicine. Two snakes plus the wings, that's a symbol of commerce. Though we use this as a symbol of medicine all the time in this country. Symbols mean whatever we want them to. Down below, they have all of these frescoes built into the place. And things that say, credit moves the modern business world. Life punishes the thriftless. And this magnificent grill work on the front with this is by Ed Gibson was the artist. These LED designs, when the train goes by right out in front of it, it almost looks like it's animated. It's all full of these slogans about people building up their wealth and not being thrifty. They went out of business a couple of years after they opened. Perhaps not listening to their own advice well enough. We're also going to go out to the suburbs briefly. Down in Chicago Heights is Bloom High School, which is a magnificent Art Deco high school. And on the inside, they've got these WPA murals. When the WPA reinvested in America and put artists to work during the Depression. These are some magnificent ones of people studying and working in various fields. Now, it's worth pointing out that these people do not look like the student body there today. I hope they find a way to keep these. I don't think they're in danger. We'll move up. Sometimes you just see Art Deco touches in buildings. Like here at the old power station for ComEd that they couldn't tear down when they were adding Block 37 right in the loop, is this fresco on the front, we'll close in here, the Spirit of Electricity. I love this. It's an electrical building, and here we have this giant wearing a tasteful loincloth, but no shirt. It's kind of looking like the Incredible Hulk there. Standing there with bolts of lightning, sending out power to the cities and to the outlying towns. You can see the little residential houses down below, and also the nice vertical lines there. Now, this is a fresco by Sylvia Shaw Judson, who is one of the Graceland residents, perhaps best known for the Bird Girl statue on the cover of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. Book I've still never read. It reminds me really of a building in New York, a whole building on this same theme, the General Electric building. between Midtown and Central Park. There's you can see here much more much more clearly than you usually do in Chicago this ziggurat style as it gets narrower as it gets taller. And once again on there we've got an awful lot of things like lightning bolt imagery is built in all over the place. It's kind of hanging on to the Prairie School. The Prairie School architects always liked little subtle hints about what a building was for on the outside of a building. You still see that in Art Deco as well. That carried over some. Now, classifying buildings as Art Deco versus Beaux Art versus Art Nouveau versus Prairie School, it's not really that clear-cut. There's any number of buildings that you could describe in lots of different ways. People really get tricky about this sort of thing sometimes. But another one that we generally say is Art Deco would be Halliburton Root's Chicago Daily News building from 1929 and 30. This is, I once heard this described as like a cubist rendition of the Sphinx. And up around the edge of this little plaza. It was a very new idea to have a public plaza out front at the time. There's all of these nice faces and frescoes, which are also by Alvin Meyer, the same guy who did the ones outside of the Board of Trade, of the Led Zeppelin-looking guy and the Native American guy. We can walk around the whole edge of this. These frescoes tell a story. They have frescoes honoring a lot of pioneers of journalism, including quite a few of the Daily News' old rivals. Wilbur F. Story is not included here. They also pointedly left out Hearst, I believe. And also these really cool griffins, like Art Deco renditions of magical creatures, stretched out to look tall, emphasizing their height. But there are these frescoes honoring Benjamin Franklin, who ran a newspaper, Joseph Medill, Victor Lawson right there, that was the publisher of the Daily News himself, Horace Greeley, New York Tribune. So much better a paper than the New York Herald, which is wildly entertaining sometimes, but once they get to the editorials, you just want to barf. There's a good Art Deco-looking vibe of it. And on the inside, they maintain a few of these touches. There hasn't been a newspaper office in decades now, but they still have things like the directory covered in this Art Deco-style grill. And right across the river from it, standing in the plaza, you're staring down the Civic Opera Building from 1929 by Graham Anderson, Probst, and White. And this one I have sometimes described myself as sort of like a Beaux-Arts style building over an Art Deco frame. It's like an Art Deco building wearing a Beaux-Arts costume. Move around to the front of it here. There's a mixture of Art Deco and Beaux-Arts style touches. I guess that you just don't want to be too modern with an opera house. Now you see, even the columns here are kind of an Art Deco streamlining of old Corinthian columns. You can see there's three kinds of column tops. There's Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian, the crazy pineapple-looking thing. I get one school group every year that they've learned all about columns right before they come, so you can like point out a column and they'll shout out what kind it is. It's awesome. But here you can see these Corinthian ones on the right. Underneath these are Art Deco versions of it. So, with the Civic Opera Building, I guess they didn't want to be too modern, but they tried. Another example of Corinthian here from the Parthenon. And one thing we got to point out, the Civic Opera Building has the best message board sign game in the business. This particular one is, "We're not on mute." Visit us online at lyricopera.org. There's also, "Carmen, we're bringing sexy back." Let's zip across up to the river here. This one is another one with sort of Art Deco-ized columns. I guess you could almost say that they were Doric columns. They don't really have tops on there. But really, there's just no tops at all. It's that streamlined. You would barely even notice that these were columns unless you got up close. But this is the old Chicago Post and later the Sun-Times building by Halliburton Root from 1927. It was the Sun-Times building until 58 when they moved to this hideous building, a series of increasingly hideous buildings. There's a larger version of it. It's still the best building the Sun-Times ever had. And as we move in here, we see this is a much more streamlined version of the columns. Almost Art Nouveau, really. We'll also take a look down the road here at the Tacoma building. This used to be the look the Tacoma building. The Tacoma building looked like this, but on its same site here is now One North LaSalle. Let's check out the elevators inside of this place. Once again, we see the motif of really tall people. And there's a drawing of how it was originally designed in the Landmark Commission, that kind of cash register waterfall look. And just down the block from that is one of the finest Art Deco examples in Chicago, one of the simplest and cleanest, the Field Building, now known as the Bank of America Building. Here's a nice looking up version of it. You know, those long, streamlined window banks that emphasize the height of the building. This was built on the site of the home insurance building, which is generally regarded as the first modern skyscraper with steel frame construction. That was by William LeBaron Jenney. This one, the Field Building, is Graham Anderson, Probst & White, one of their last big Art Deco buildings before the Depression knocked that out. Upside, most of these places have like secret clubs hidden in them someplace. This is the stairway up to the Attic Club, designed by David Ayers. Here's a rendition of how it was going to look initially. It really kind of projects a feeling of strength with this one. Also, this also appears on the Architecture of Mysterious Chicago tour. One story here from the 1940s. There was a guy named Walter Tarpley who was trying to win the big insurance sales drive. You know, every year they had a contest that would go a month for who could sell the most insurance. He was just about to win when Walter Habnick, at the last second, sold a giant policy to himself. Doesn't this just look like the kind of guy who would sell insurance to himself in order to win a contest? Walter Tarpley was so mad that he shot him to death. I've never found out whether they had to pay the claim on his new policy. We'll stick around the loop for us for one more. We go up east of Michigan Avenue, right above Millennium Park, this building that is now the Hampton Inn, one of a couple of Hampton Inns nearby, which can really confuse bus drivers. But this is the old Chicago Motor Club building, a 1928 Halliburton root joint. We'll see it a little bit of it from further back. And up closer, we've got that same Art Deco style grill that we've often seen today. It was the old Chicago Motor Club. It was basically a car club, used this as their clubhouse and hangout place. And on the inside, they've got a lot of the original architectural touches at least restored. And you can see they've got the kind of car they would have been drooling over at the time. And up along here, we can still see that. Well, what we see if we look up closely here, these details are all kind of inspired by cars. If you look here closely, you can see these all look like spokes, like tires. Similar to the Chrysler building in New York, everything kind of looks like tires up top. We see more of that down on 55th Street on the south side. It's a building called the Deco Arts Building, also known as the Ritz Garage, designed by a guy named Louis Croman, back when car culture was still so new in the 1920s. And here you see all these things that look like just designs at first, but if you look a little more closely, you see that these are tires. And this was really just a very fancy garage. It also had things like showers for the drivers at the time. We've got all of these nice roadsters carved right in, just like the car Nancy Drew drove in the very earliest books. Cruella de Vil cars. I really thought they should have had. I love the Cruella movie, but she really should have been an old flapper. I'm just dying to write in the line, I am big. It's the puppies who got small. But also, you see the architectural detail. This is the Chrysler building in New York. Is the same thing. The top of it is all made to look like tires. That's the idea, anyway. We don't usually think of tires as a design element, or if we do, it's like tires stacked on top of each other into like a waving statue. Not quite this classy or artsy. But I think you can see, like, when people make statues out of tires out in front of their garage or their tire shop, we're really just seeing the evolution of that. There's another really cool one. The people of this era also were super into ancient Egypt stuff. King Tut's tomb had just been discovered. So the Laramie State Bank out in Austin on the far west side is designed to look like a giant pharaoh's tomb, or at least the way we would imagine a pharaoh's tomb in the 1920s. Very Indiana Jones-like. If we get a little bit closer here, we see what kind of looks like hieroglyphics at first are really representations of money and people saving their money. And then we got scarab. It's what looks like scarabs is really eagles standing on top of the world. This building's gone through a number of changes over the years. Last I saw it was like a potpourri store was operating inside. There's talk of being like a community center. They're always looking for new stuff to do, but ancient Egyptian stuff you do come across quite a bit. One of the more famous examples is up on the north side is Reby Moving and Storage. Right across and up the block from the St. Valentine's Day Massacre site. Moving a little bit closer here. There we go. You can see the mummies, scarabs, and everything. Plus, in the colors that might actually be period documented, there's like traces of paint that they found on the Sphinx that indicated at one point the whole thing was painted and very colorful, not just sandstone. Moving a little bit closer here. We see not only Egyptian stuff, but it goes up to they've turned what looked like a scarab into the caduceus, the two snakes and the winged staff back behind them. We see that all over. This even extends into things like funeral homes from the 1930s. This is the Grain Funeral Home on Irving Park, built with a lot of Art Deco design elements. It kind of needs a clean out these days. It was also right near to the Orange Garden Chop Suey shop. Billy Corgan bought this neon sign. It's now up in Highland Park. We're over on the west side. Let's do a few other examples of buildings here. One of them works colors in. You don't see them working colors in that often. But here's the Richter Food Products building. Moving on the sign there, Richter's Food Products Incorporated. It's mostly a brick building, but still with a lot of Art Deco elements. And then on the south side, we start seeing this church, which really had the towers added a little bit later. But here, as we move in, we're actually starting to move to a whole different style. So let me back up a bit. Of course, maybe my favorite building in all the city, the Carbide and Carbon building by the Burnham brothers, 1929. These were Daniel Burnham's sons, Daniel Jr. and Hubert. And we get up top here. The lovely view of the top of the green and gold top. Now, on every boat tour, they say this was designed to look like an Art Deco version of a champagne bottle. I thought that was an urban legend for years, until somebody sent me a diary entry from one of the Burnham brothers, where he does talk about how they wanted it to look like the American Radiator building in New York, overlooking Bryant Park, but in the color, the dark green color of an old champagne bottle. So there really is something to that story, which in 1929 was fairly bold. You know, they said old champagne bottle because you couldn't legally buy champagne for a while at that time. And grill work, of course, all over the place. And all over the doors, those same elements we've seen in so many others. But when I say the First Church and the Esquire building are kind of moving into a new style, one thing you notice here is these are rounded rectangles, not just streamlined rectangles. This means that we're starting to move into Art Moderne, the style that came after this. We see a little bit more of that on the old Esquire Theater, which has got another building in front of it now. Art Moderne or Streamline Moderne, which took the Art Deco style and added more curves, essentially is what it was. That really came into its own in 1933 at the World's Fair that we had here in Chicago that year. We'll show we actually got some film footage of that I can show off.
Here we are, folks, at Chicago's world-famed Century of Progress, the spectacular fair that was started by a beam of light from the star Arcturus. No less than 22 millions of them came swarming into this colossal show to witness the brilliant handiwork of its modern, unparalleled ingenuity. They create a picture that enthralls the eye with their sweep and majesty, a gorgeous climax to this vista of blue-green lagoon, the hope of design made real. Mingling with the brisk tone of modern America, we find, too, the spice and flavor of the foreign. Once it was Ferris wheel, but today it's the towering sky ride that offers the major thrill of the fair. traveling across the lagoon, one saw far below the fairgrounds in a molten glow of brilliance. Blues and reds and greens and yellows, all fused into a blazing kaleidoscope of color. Here's King Kong himself and two of his gentle playmates entertaining the Midway crowds. And now we come upon a most unique structure, the Travel and Transport Building, presenting a dominant phase of industry in its most commanding aspects, a triumph of architectural design and balance. And here is transportation in its most modern, thrilling expression. The Temple of Champions, with its clean-cut lines and splashing fountains, mingling beauty with utility. In the shadow of this modern architecture, crowds come daily to see how cars are subjected to acid tests of endurance. This miniature track, with its 45-degree side banks and its saucer turns, is the proving ground of car performance.
I can picture Keaton turning in a note like that. Signed, Keaton's mom. Like Epstein and Welcome Back, Kotter. So that was the style that grew out of Art Deco. By the 1950s, we had moved into things like Googie, which is also known as Ray Gun Gothic. I love this style myself. We don't have that much of it in Chicago. Probably not enough to do a whole tour. But maybe I can find a little bit more of that. I just love that style so much. But that brings us right to 1040, everybody. So, all right. That is one of my favorite tours to do. I should really update it and find some more stuff to add in. But, you know, this is about, hey, look, everybody, look who's back. Ronnie is back from her residency at Hamline University, where she is getting a master's degree in writing for children and young adults. Ronnie, come tell us all about it, you know.
Hi, everybody. Oh, I look silly.
We always look silly around here. It's no
I
biggie.
am tired. I'm learning all kinds of stuff about writing and story and craft, and my mind is kind of like this right now.
Want to tell us about your next book?
My next book's called This Night Is Ours, and it is out sometime next year, spring 2024.
All right. Thanks, Ronnie. All right. Welcome back. She's been out of town for nearly 2 weeks now.
I am going to collapse.
All right. Collapse away. All right. So, all right, everybody. With that, I will put the Benny Goodman on. I haven't listed the tour for Thursday night yet, but something's definitely coming. Maybe we'll do Underground Railroad again or something. It's been a while since we did the Underground Railroad in Chicago. So, all right, here we go. Here's Benny Goodman coming to us live from the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. With him, as always, Helen Ward singing along. Thanks, Dina. Well, hey, I have 25 books, and I'm by no means a master. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, everybody, and thanks, everybody, hitting these donate buttons here. They help to keep these free and frequent. Oh, yeah, and she's got a degree to pay for, so keep hitting that button, she says. Yeah. Hey, Kitty, thanks a lot. I'm going to rush and refill the tea. I got the water going a minute ago. All right. Bob, I've stayed pretty well on Spooky. All right, but I love that stuff. What happened to the furniture marts? Like the one that was adjacent to the merchandise mart? Oh, there was the one that was further up, too. There was said to have a helicopter landing pad, one of several buildings with such things. Or a blimp landing pad. I'd have to dig into it. I'd have to dig into that. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. Back to bed sounds good all around. Ronnie's plane got in super early today. Okay, I think it's been replaced by the Sun-Times building now.
And here's another tune that they'll be playing as long as we dance. Stardust.
Yeah, it is a whole complex, though. Ronnie worked in there for a while. I don't know if there's any furniture in there anymore. But Miles and Priya were running around early. We showed them at the beginning of the tour, at least. Miles is in with Ronnie now. And Priya's probably hiding someplace. Priya's probably mad at Ronnie. She will be for a day or so. Building is the one with the ironwork that would look animated. That is the Trustee System Services building, Jody. Trustee with 2 E's instead of a Y. Yeah, Chris, if you don't have a Zeppelin landing pad, you'll be obsolete. Why, in a couple of years, everybody's going to be flying around in Zeppelins. Thank you, Georgia. Krista, she's doing a low residency program, so she's there like a week per semester or so. The Alan Rickman impression. Did I do that one of those one today? I occasionally do like Snape doing Julius Caesar. Wherefore rejoice. What conquest brings ye home? What tributaries follow him from Rome to grace in captive bonds his chariot wheels? Knew ye not? Potter! Thank you, Laura. I just got an email in all capital letters, subject, digging up the dead. This is some guy who's subscribing to his Substack. I don't think Marlene. I don't recall signing up for this. But it's an interesting email sometimes, so I let it go. Thank you, Christine. Now, one time I was coming on Milwaukee Avenue and Alan Rickman walked out of a bookstore and kind of gave me this look like, for the love of God, don't come talk to me. No, I did not. When that dude glares at you, you stay glared at.
Ellen Ward sings once more.
Normally, I feel like if I see celebrities, I probably wouldn't be sure it was them. But him, yeah, you knew right away that was him. Usually I have to get like a second or third opinion. Like, is that the mayor? Well, look who's come to say hi. Here we go. Hey, Miles. I saw him like sitting there waiting his turn. Who tracked paint all over the floor yesterday? Who was that? Who? I know who. Okay. Who's gonna actually let me work later today? Please don't knock the Beatles over. I gotta clean up this desk. It's a mess. You about ready to come back up, Miles? Alright, let's try it like this, huh? Is this more comfy for you? There you go. Why did that just hurt me? Whoa! And now he's up here.
Benny Goodman's orchestra and the King Porter's Stomp.
Rebecca just now? Oh man, most of my Christmas stuff is long put away, and the Hanukkah stuff. I wouldn't have any of it up to me. Well, Mandy just gave us all Malort Christmas ornaments yesterday. Yeah, it was my own fault for having him around when there was paint going around. I tried shutting him in the room, but he managed to find a way out. I was just painting some audio cables. I wanted to extend the Bluetooth transmitter from the record player out into the hallway so I could walk all over the apartment. And now I can get as far, at least, as the pantry, until I get to the pantry. Here you go, Miles. Ready for your close-up? Yeah, flop. Get fur all into my teeth. Move it over here. Yeah, Miles staking out his claim here. The lighting is not conducive here. Miles, this isn't the best lighting. Get a better angle than this. You guys want to see something? This is the cover. It's still in progress. I still might tweak it a little bit. But it's the cover to the new limited time single that'll be out in time for Valentine's Day. It's a very classy song about Shakespearean textual irregularities, 18th century literature, Chaucer, Rabelais, Balzac, all of that. It is called Rock Out with your, instead of putting the cover on there, I just said rock out like these old tops are doing, only with your junk showing. And I just love this picture. There's like such a treasure of dance marathon photos. Like this couple doesn't think they're going to win. Somebody talked them into doing this. They're horribly embarrassed even to be here. This guy's looking on because he likes the guy's butt. The guy next to him is kind of grunting because he knows he's supposed to club somebody's knee here, but he's not sure whose. The guy behind him is the guy whose job it is to remember whose knee to club. This woman thinks she's got a pretty good chance of winning this, but she's not super excited to be here because she doesn't like all the people staring at her, like the guy right behind her. Then this guy definitely thinks he's going to win, you can tell. But meanwhile, this guy in the bowler hat behind him knows that he's going to get his knee clubbed, so he's going to be losing. The smaller guy just likes seeing people get clubbed. The guy with the not so bright look on his face is in love with her. This is the judge, but he's absolutely crooked, definitely on the take. This guy behind him is, well, first you got this older guy with the mustache. He's in love with the woman on the left here, and she knows it. He's offering her, you should come away and marry me. You know, you'll want for nothing, etc., etc. I'm one of your father's wealthy business associates. The guy to the right is the one guy who's here because he just loves dance marathons so much. The guy behind him in the glasses and hat is Batman. There. Now that track is mixed and mastered. I have not really done a dance hall program. I'm not sure what I'd say about them. But maybe we can come up with something interesting there. Other than saying, this was a dance hall. This was a dance hall. See this? That was a dance hall.
From the Joseph Urban Room in the Congress Hotel in the city of Chicago, we bring you music by Benny Goodman and his orchestra, stylized swing rhythm. And here's the first one called Remember.
All right, stylized swing rhythm. This was a musical series that really introduced a lot of people to swing music. But all right, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. Yeah, that picture's like a Renaissance painting. I'll do a TikTok of that when the song actually comes out. You know, I very rarely really promote the limited time material. So I feel like if I had gotten more into music professionally, the way that I did with books, I might not enjoy music the way I still do. The way I can't with books anymore. But all right, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours. We'll be back tomorrow morning for Mural Monday. Until then, everybody, stay safe, stay strong, and of course, if you can, ladies and gentlemen, stay spooky, everybody. If you're interested in Chicago dance halls, there's a book called 10 Cents a Dance that came out a few years ago when there was a broader range of stuff you could talk about in young adult novels. It's about taxi dancers in Chicago back in like the late 1930s, early 1940s, where you'd pay 10 cents a dance. Really interesting book. But all right, thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago. Stay safe and stay strong, and of course, folks, stay spooky.